swallowed the red pill back in 2008 and began reporting the news in front of a camera in 2019. In that time, we've seen a complete upheaval in world politics. The battle lines have changed between the illusion of left versus right to the reality of globalism versus nationalism. Despite all the information, the truth and the lies, there are two very distinct pathways emerging. Should we follow Labor and Liberal to a dystopic one-world government, or do we fight for our nationalism, unlock our hidden resources wealth and build a new Australia? With the world teetering on a knife's edge, should we solidify our relationship with the USA and become the 51st state? This is my mission statement here on Australian National Review, and I welcome you to black pill me as hard as you can as we determine our future together. This is the 51st state. Hello and welcome to the 51st state, and we are going to start a whole new week with a brand new way of looking at things. Now, it's a big deal when you are on this particular show and you're starting to ask big questions about who we are as Australians and where do we look around the world for real change that's going to make a real difference in our lives. And you start at the basics. When we came from a period a few years back where if you didn't go along to get along, if you weren't part of the groupthink, even when they were pushing DEI upon us all, you were to be excluded if you didn't go along. And so we have to consolidate as we move forward here as part of the independent media. That's a big deal. How are we going to credential and be considered on a level playing field and raise standards, etc.? What happens when it comes to the next election and the Senate parties decide to again consolidate one way or another and put the best candidates forward? What happens when we go to the doctor next time when we want a second opinion if the doctor is not doing what we want but doing what the government tells them is the way to treat us? What happens when we finally get a shot at taking these people to court and we have a legal system in the world of artificial intelligence? What happens next? Can we be the masters of our own domain and use the system that is being built to be against us and tip the scales the other direction and use artificial intelligence for our benefit, perhaps through transparency, perhaps through a way of building great case law? It's a great mystery. Well, in today's show, we are going to explore natural law and artificial intelligence, what it means for you and me and for all of us in a world gone mad, where the rules don't seem to apply equally at all anymore. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back to introduce you to my guest, Rob McMullan, after this break. You're watching the 51st State.
Australian National Review is Australia's first real free and independent press. One with no editorial control by the elite, but a publication that can generate critical thinkers and critical debate, and hold those spreading mistruths and deliberate propaganda in mainstream media to account. News with a difference that will be educational, compelling, and create a platform for political and social change in this country, and address the real issues facing this country and the world.
And welcome back to the 51st State. My guest this hour is Rob McMullan. He embodies the entrepreneurial spirit vital to Queensland's prosperity, and I'll let him tell you a bit more about that. But he holds a degree from the Queensland Conservatorium. Rob has balanced his artistic pursuits with active political engagement over the past decade. He's also an official spokesperson for the US-based Natural Law Institute. He has delivered public appearances and participated in widely viewed podcasts discussing natural law philosophy and political theory. His commitment to public service was evident in his 2022 candidacy for the federal seat of Griffith under the UAP, where he led volunteer teams, organised community events and represented party policies on ABC radio. Then he backed up in 25 as a Queensland Senate candidate. Rob McMullan, welcome to the 51st State.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for the very flattering intro.
Well, you know what, Rob, it's well-deserved. We've known each other for a few years now, and I tell you what, when we were trying to navigate, 3-4 years ago, what was going on, I remember whenever I spoke to you, you were the voice of reason, and you always had new ideas that I had not heard about. And I'm looking forward to the great big catch-up. But it's been tough.
Me too. It has been tough. I was just thinking, you said you're welcome to be black-pilled. Because, black pill, and you're talking my language, man. A lot going on in the world these days. There's a lot going on.
Well, this is it. And one of the things that I think is really interesting, Rob, is that throughout what's going on, you also have to have your feet firmly planted on the ground, and you still have to participate in society, and you still have to do all those normal things. And for you, you are a professional muso, just the same. Have you noticed anything different in giving a performance today as maybe 5 years ago? What changed?
Look, I do agree that no matter what goes on politically, it's never an excuse to give up on your actual life. And, I'm full steam ahead with my life, my business, my family, and that's actually what makes it all worthwhile. There's some general discussion about the loss of trust and community since COVID. And I think that while my job itself hasn't changed that much, I think there's definitely a sense that we are in a lower trust society. And that's something I think people feel across the board. The thing is with the COVID response, and I'm like you, I'm still not over it. I think it was really bad, and we need to not forget what happened, but it's like half of society just threw the other half of society under the bus, and where I think we sort of felt like we were one nation, it really became uncovered that half of society is actually quite prepared to throw other people under the bus, or to throw individual rights and reason and logic out the window if incentives suit them. People say everyone gets along well when the incentives are good, but as the incentives get worse, then things start changing. And we had a little brush with that. And so I definitely think that maybe where people prior to 5 years ago just felt like we're a nation of people, and we had a shared vision, a shared goal, and we had rights, and we had cooperation. There's definitely a sense in which that has changed, and is changing very rapidly, especially with the runaway immigration and the political issues we're going through now, that we are going to devolve into sectarian competing sects of different people, and not seeing ourselves as a united whole so much as a nation with a shared vision. And the whole point about democracy is a way for people with shared incentives and a shared vision and a shared identity to work out common goals. This point's been made a lot too. You might not get everything you want in a democracy, but at the same, once it's all said and done, you agree to the process, because at the end of it, you're still a family, you're still a nation, you're still a collective group of people. But I think we're actually losing that very rapidly, and democracy is becoming a way for one group to consume another group, quite frankly. And it just feels like after the COVID response, that was the corner that we've turned since then.
So would you describe the idea of one part of the group consuming the other as the democracy, this idea of the go along to get along group thing versus the individuals who effectively stood up and pushed back? Is that how you read it?
Yeah, well, we had people bearing costs, severe costs, having severe punishments and restrictions when there's no evidence that they actually did anything to anybody. so they'd say, oh, well, you have to forego your income. You have to be fired from your business. You can't say goodbye to your dying loved ones. You can't travel across state lines to get your sick child into a hospital. And we had all sorts of things. We had people die from shots. We had, babies die because they couldn't get across borders to get into hospitals. And so we had severe punishments forced onto people that had not actually done anything wrong. They were convicted of the crime of potentially, maybe at some point, in some small way, contributing to some harm done. But no one could ever prove that your freedom had infected another person. No one could ever prove that your business had, killed anyone, that sort of thing. So it's all just on the suspicion. So basically, my read is that, we're supposed to have a rule of law society. And, I do a lot of work on what are the central values of Western civilization. Our central institution has always been the rule of law. The rule of law applies to individuals, not collectives. We're against things like collective punishments, because an individual person has to have actually done something to be punished for. But what we found in COVID was, under the guise of safety and a lot of government propaganda, entire groups and demographics of people were essentially restricted and punished and had their individual rights rescinded on the possibility that they'd done something to somebody else, not because they'd actually done anything to anyone else.
Look, it's when you say it, it's obvious, but to arrive at that conclusion takes a whole lot of work. What, therefore, was your interest in arriving at this and therefore becoming a spokesperson for the Natural Law Institute? It just seems like this is how it's led you to this. Did you arrive there first and get to these thoughts, or did you come up with this and then go, that's where I need to head?
So that Natural Law project is an interesting one. I've been with it for a long time, and last couple of years become an official spokesperson. Some people, I think, are wired to just want to solve problems, solve human problems, and I've just been interested in that for a long time. Politics, I think ever since I started paying real tax, when you actually work and you start really paying some tax, you become keenly aware, especially as a self-employed person, become keenly aware of the costs. There's a lot of people actually just employed. They get to have their tax withheld, and so they're not actually fully aware that they're paying the tax. They just get to see their reduced paycheck at the end of the day, shake their fist at how unfair their employer is. And I'm not really sure to what degree it's in their consciousness how much they're actually paying in tax. But when you're self-employed and you actually physically hand it over every quarter, it becomes very, very apparent. And so, that started probably 15 years ago for me, an interest in politics and then philosophy and just general sort of civilizational problem solving. And then I, found my way into the natural law project in the States. And I feel like I've arrived at a place of having some pretty comprehensive, clear answers on a lot of issues with that project. So it's a US-based think tank. And what is it? It covers so many different disciplines, it's actually hard to define. There's a lot of science, there's social science, there's what people would call some sort of philosophy, there's legal philosophy. But really what it comes down to is a method of decidability on how to make moral and legal judgments on human cooperation. So really the basis of human cooperation is reciprocity. We want to win. We want to win. And what is actually moral and what we think the law should encode to the greatest degree possible is reciprocal win-win relationships, cooperative relationships. So, people talk about that all the time. We go into a lot of detail about it. But to bring it back to the COVID thing, you can see that everybody has incentives they want to fulfill. And some people with the COVID response, their incentive was, I want to maximize my personal safety. Now, it's completely fine to want things and to work towards things, but in the same way that if I say, well, I want an iPad, and I walk into an Apple store and I rob them, then that's not a reciprocal win-win way to get what I want. What I actually have to do is earn some money and hand over the money. And so we trade. A win-win reciprocal trade is what's moral. Now, what happened in COVID is that a lot of people said, well, I want to feel safe. But they didn't go about it with a reciprocal trade. They went about it at other people's expense, because other people were like, well, I don't want to feel, I've got a cost benefit analysis where I'd like to trade a little bit of my potential safety for the ability to pay my mortgage. And other people said, I don't care about your mortgage, and I work for this institution or this government thing, or I've got a protected job, so I'm going to fully support getting what I want at your expense. So I mean, that's a little on the natural law project itself. Is it's really the science and the philosophy and the legal philosophy of human cooperation. And so it seems like a bit of an abstract thing to start with, but really there's not many things that you can't feed through the algorithms and get a pretty clear and concise and profound answer. So the next step that is happening, I mean, there's a draft of the first book. It's a very big project. We talk about a lot of stuff, but the first book is in the process of being finalized and published. That'll be out this year. And as you mentioned before, we're staring down the barrel of an AI revolution. Well, the guys are actually uploading all this work to AI models, and it's in the beta stage at the moment. I can access the beta. It's not publicly available yet, but you can put moral and legal judgments using the scientific framework of natural law, and then get quite concise answers. So, I mean, I'm not sure to what degree you want me to go into it, Chase. I can nerd out all day, but I mean, the guys talk about, like all sort of philosophers and that we go right from the first principles of the universe up. And just to give you a little bit of a really quick overview, if you look at every hierarchy of matter, like you find out that the matter itself is an expression of a stable relationship between different energetic forces, and then that builds into physics and then biology and chemistry, in the same way that our body is a identifiable unit, but it's made out of cooperative parts that have found stable relationships with each other. And if you introduce cancer into your body, well, it starts degrading the system because that's consuming the other cells. It doesn't cooperate with the other cells, and this is the repeating pattern all the way down to the first principles of the universe. And so where this is sort of adding up is that human society, much like a healthy body where the cells are actually cooperating reciprocally, they're finding what we call a stable relation. Our cells find a stable relationship and create our body, which functions and creates the next layer of complexity. Well, the next layer of complexity above our bodies and ourselves is human civilization. And so the stable relationship is how we define reciprocity. We define the stable relationship by reciprocity. And so that's why it becomes quite important to talk about cooperation, because say if we go back to COVID once again, it's a perfect example. You've got some people, i.e. some cells in society, wanting to thrive at other people's expense. Now, that's like introducing cancer into the body. You've got some cells that are eating the other cells, and you're not going to have a thriving body if the cancer keeps spreading. It's going to kill that level. And in the same way, corruption and irreciprocity will eat away at your society, and you won't have that. So, I mean, the big picture is that we would like to be exploring the universe, but we're not going to be doing that if our society, is consuming itself with bad legal philosophy and bad cooperation and bad judgments on human cooperation. So to give you a little quick overview of when I did put the COVID thing through the natural law AI, and it gives some really good points to think about, some good language. I said, I asked the Natural Law Institute AI to pass moral and legal judgment on the Australian government's COVID response. This is what it said. Judgment of Australia's pandemic mandate abstracts. This essay applies the principles of natural law, blah, blah, blah. By employing the framework of operationality, testifiability, and reciprocity, it argues that the measures instituted by the Australian government, which is talking about vaccine mandates, movement restrictions, access prohibitions, etc., constitute a systematic violation of natural law. So to go into it a little bit, talks about the crisis, first principles, sovereignty, reciprocity, and testimony, which means sovereignty is our individual rights. You know, we talk about individualism as a core fundamental value of the West. We say sovereignty because an individual freedom is freedom to do what? But a sovereign is someone who's responsible. So a responsible person should be trading reciprocally with other people and also telling the truth, as we talk about testimony. Operational failure. There was no disaggregated risk-based demonstration. So there was no defined demonstration that the unvaccinated pose an imminent individual level threat warranting prophylactic exclusion. Generalized statistical claims are insufficient. So what it's saying here is that violates the natural law of reciprocal cooperation to say there's a vague possibility that you might do something, therefore we're going to impose this on you. Reciprocal failure, prohibition of movement, it just goes on. I mean, I don't want to rant too much. I would just say, ladies and gents, if you would like to follow me at the McMullan, all of these things are on my X profile, and I do this stuff all the time. But you know, you do get some language out of these things where it says a general statistical argument is not sufficient to impose on people's individual rights. You know, that's a legal argument.
Just that alone, Rob, should open up for those watching or listening that there is now an opportunity for greater understanding against what was put upon us over those past 5 years. And when you talked about the idea of sovereign meaning responsibility and the idea of truth, we just want the truth. And we've lived through this period where the truth was hidden from us in so many different ways. Doctors were told that they must go along to get along or they will lose their license, both here in Australia and overseas. And therefore, you couldn't put out what was the truth based on government broad statistics, not general statistics. We used to report them every day, broken down to the nth degree, for example. So there were so many different scenarios there. With your work now understanding natural law and perhaps by using the AI and the algorithm, etc., are you discovering pathways of action, for example, or where legal practitioners or even individuals in the future will be able to use this to protect themselves against a system coming after them? Is that part of this approach?
Well, look, I think for me and for your viewers at the moment, there's certainly some language that can be used. Whether this scales up into actual professionals and institutions, it really depends on to what degree they're biased against you. I mean, look, to give another couple of examples, when it says here that the three criteria that the AI spat out with the COVID response: operational failure, like I said, generalized risk, statistical claims are not sufficient for what they did to individual people. A testimonial failure, which means the truth, the failure to speak the truth. It says here, public health officials claimed the vaccines were safe and effective without full disclosure of unknowns, adverse event probabilities, or limitations. These statements were made without personal liability or possibility of restitution. That violates natural law because there were people who were severely adversely affected, and they, as to the best of my knowledge, they got nothing or next to nothing. And then the reciprocal failure, like we say, the gold standard of human cooperation is reciprocity, and the failure of reciprocity, the state imposed harms without compensation or individual adjudication. This is a categorical violation of reciprocity and demonstrated interests. So there's definitely some language there. There's a case in the US that another fellow from the Institute is starting a lawfare case where he lives, and we're going to see how that goes. But that's the next level of this, is actually to put together some legal challenges and start our own version of lawfare against the institutions for these kind of things. I mean, you could do the same algorithm analyses for COVID, for immigration, for trans propaganda, anything like that, you know. And so that's sort of the next step. I think, you know, where the Institute's at, the first of many books is getting finalized. The AI is getting trained. The work and the science is done, but it's internal mostly at the moment. However, if you are interested in the project, you can follow me and all the other fellows on Twitter, our X, and, you know, we're always on there talking about it and the insights. But definitely, I think what we can offer now is some language, some clear thinking, some clear principles of cooperation. Like I said, I just gave you operational truth and reciprocal failures of the government. We can explain it in pretty clear language what the problem is. But we definitely need to scale that up into institutional challenges. But I think the value for having a system like this is it is a ground up system. I mean, the guy who started it, if you think about Marxism and what Marx did, is he took he spearheaded an entire philosophy and legal philosophy and movement and worldview, and he wrote it down from his, you know, as much as, you know, it's incomprehensible and it's silly, but what he did do is he wrote it down, and once it's written down, people can get behind it. They can proselytize, they can push it, they can fight for it. You've got something to give you a gold standard of the world that you want to see manifest. Well, this is what the guys have done, this in response to Marxism. It's like the counter philosophy, the counter legal philosophy of against what's happening with Marxism. You know, we've got the science right from the way human brains perceive reality and how we work, and like I said, the stable relationships of everything in existence. And you can see the repeating patterns of how we've all got to get along to create the superstructure that we want of human civilization. And it does come down to how we've defined reciprocity, you know, and we've got a checklist. You know, reciprocity should be voluntary, fully informed, exhaustively informed, warranted, free of externalities on the demonstrated interests of others. And so if you go through that checklist, you say, well, reciprocal cooperation should be warranted, which means if you suffer any negative effects that I haven't told you about as a result of what I'm doing, can I warranty that? Can I give you restitution? Well, did they do that with COVID? No. When they tell you that your child now, like in Victoria, may be born in the wrong body, and maybe if your child latches onto this and has negative effects, well, do they warranty those claims? Are they exhaustively informing you? Are they worried about the externalities? No, it violates natural law of reciprocal cooperation. So at least you get some language there to work with, I think.
So this is, now that you've described it as part of the philosophy of law, it's the way that you think about the structure of making laws, I suppose, as much as understanding those that are already in existence. Given your run in 22 and your run in 25, were you able to use these concepts to explain to your party and to other candidates where you were going, and did it have any effect?
Yeah, look, I think the main effect is doing shows like this and other presenters and things like that, where I can use the system, I can use the principles to put together an argument. And what happens is, there's a lot of people that politically feel something, but they don't really have the terminology, the exact words to explain what is wrong with it, because there's a lot of gaslighting. So I had one guy say to me just recently, here's the full reciprocity checklist. I think we talked about this in 22: voluntary, exhaustively informed, productive, warranted, and free of externalities on other people. And so he said, oh, but isn't just the COVID response, isn't it just the social contract? And I said, because I have the language to say, I said, there's no social contract if you're lying. If you're telling me it's safe and effective, and we don't have what I referenced before, testimonial truth, are you telling me the facts? Testimonial truth means testifying. Give me the facts, like you're in an army. How many people are over the hill? What are they doing? Don't tell me how you feel about it. Don't emotionally inflate it. Just give me the straight facts. Did they do that with COVID? No. So because of the system, I could, very easily say to him, there's no social contract if you are not telling the truth, if you've got a testimonial failure and reciprocal failure. So just like any other social contract, should the social contract be voluntary, fully informed, productive, warranted? Do they have to warranty what they're saying? Is it free of externalities? It failed all of those counts. So no, we don't actually have a social contract. What we have is social cannibalism masquerading as cooperation.
Just explain that in a little more detail. It's a great statement. I just want to get it summarized.
Social cannibalism, where some people's incentives are consuming other people's incentives. It's not win-win, it is win-lose. I don't care about your mortgage because I want to feel safe. So that is like an incentive cannibalism, where some people threw other people under the bus instead of an actual cooperative contract. A contract is, here are the terms that we're going to cooperate on for shared ends. But there were no shared ends. There were some people getting what they wanted at other people's expense. And so you find this with all forms of Marxism too. It is often gaslighting as cooperation. It's masquerading as a social contract, but really what it is some people parasitizing other people. And you'll find one of the things that the algorithm always says is, this person is it has a parasitical strategy. They're just trying to get what they want at other people's expense. They're not producing themselves.
That's it starts to make a whole lot more sense in those practical descriptions that you've provided. What I'd like to do is we'll take a quick break and we'll come back, and it's one thing to talk about it through the eyes of COVID, which I'm sure many people will be nodding and agreeing with, but we're going to apply it in some other applications just to see how it works, because this is your understanding of natural law, the philosophy of the law, and it comes before it. So for many people that are thinking about perhaps becoming a political candidate in the business of lawmaking, it makes a whole lot more difference when your grounding is in the understanding of how we get there, and not this process of becoming a go-along to get along number in the system that just is serving the beast, which has caused the problems in the first place. It's almost as if this should be compulsory. Go on.
I just have to clarify. So when we're talking about the actual legal system, there's going to be a lot of overlap, but natural law has a history that dates back to the Greeks and through the Romans. But a lot of it, probably one of its most famous manifestations is Aquinas, who wanted to merge secular Greek philosophy with Roman Catholicism. And so natural law, in a sense, gets a bad rap because throughout history, a lot of people who wanted to talk about natural law were doing so from a religious perspective, where they say, well, God is the natural law. And that is not sufficient for people who don't share that religion. So this is a little bit different. So, I've spoken to high profile lawyers and they say natural law is ridiculous. But then I start going through the arguments. They say there's no natural laws. And I said, well, think about entropy. Is not entropy a law of nature? And they say, well, yeah, it is actually. Right. And do humans not cooperate to persist in spite of entropy? Is that not what we do? Is we cooperate through our division of our labors? We further capture enemy to further insulate ourselves from entropy. Oh yeah. So, but what the system we live under now in the legal profession is called legal positivism, which really means anything that we can make up can be a law. And if you don't like it, you should vote and change the government. That's the system that we have. Because I've asked a lot of lawyers is what principles are put into play to create laws? And they say, oh, I think you're talking about jurisprudence, the philosophy of law. And most lawyers will go through law degrees and not even think about this. They're just applying what already exists. They don't really get down to the nuts and bolts of where this even comes from at the start. And that's what I'm doing. But the ones that can talk to you about it will say, yeah, we live under legal positivism, which really just means anything that people want can be a law. And the system that we have is that we vote for politicians. They win seats in the government. They propose laws and then they vote on laws. And if you don't like the laws that they're proposing and voting on, then you better vote in the other party that'll do the same thing. But in theory, you should change out the law proposers and the lawmakers with your politics, with your democracy. That system is failing. So I will just say it's not like I can take what we're doing and just walk into a courtroom. I mean, I'm sure that I would make really good arguments, but whether the degree to which it's overlapping with the established legal institutions, it's beginning to get there, but we are proposing something different. We are proposing an upgrade in a sense. We are proposing that laws should have something objective about them.
It's important and nonetheless, and it's the structure that will make the conversation continue, and people are trying to work out where to go next. On that note, we'll take a quick break. We'll return. Don't go anywhere. You're watching The 51st State.
Australian National Review is Australia's first real free and independent press. One with no editorial control by the elite, but a publication that can generate critical thinkers and critical debate, and hold those spreading mistruths and deliberate propaganda in mainstream media to account. News with a difference that will be educational, compelling, and create a platform for political and social change in this country, and address the real issues facing this country and the world.
And welcome back to the 51st State. My guest this hour, Rob McMullan, and we are discussing natural law, and it's certainly a topic to get you thinking as we are in a world that the legal system has turned upside down. Now, not only that, Rob, we are also talking about artificial intelligence, and I kind of find it a little bit ironic that we can be talking about artificial intelligence and natural law. How do the two come together?
Well, the natural law project that I'm with is a system that's built from the ground up, from the first principles, first scientific principles, all the way up through social science, human behavior, and cooperation. it ties it all together. It's a system of decidability from the ground up. And so it is all being put into AI. AI can go through it all as a checklist and spit out very convincing legal arguments for you. Look, why not have grand aspirations? I mean, if the guys succeed in putting this stuff as a cornerstone of AI, of truthful AI, where AI has to spit out, is something operationally possible? Is it truthful? Is it based on the testimonial truth of the matter? And does it reduce human cooperation down to reciprocity? I mean, the potential benefits for humankind, if that gets encoded at the beginning of the AI revolution, is limitless. You know, societies fail because of lying and corruption and cheating and stealing and parasitizing each other. Imagine if the new era that we're about to go into with AI, that's all essentially outlawed, and people had to come to each other, you know, whenever they went to an AI to ask about something or whatever, and it was just encoded at right in the center. How do I get what I want? Well, you have to tell the truth, cooperate, look for a win-win, exhaustively inform, do something productive, and don't piss anyone else off. You know, we could find ourselves in a new golden age. A lot of the guys that work on it, we're pretty politically aware as well, and things are not looking good in the West. And so there's also the possibility that we might just have a system to rebuild from, you know? I'm not sure.
It is fascinating, isn't it? Because the West, as you described, things aren't looking particularly good. The United States, though, is turning everything upside down. So we've watched the globalists and the nationalists split, which is part of what this show's all about. And you have the process of real legal challenges, criminal referrals, etc., happening and reporting almost on a daily basis what's coming out of the US. So there is great breakthrough coming, at least at that sense. Now, one wonders if we can talk like this academically, strategically, but when or if and when there were to be, for example, some significant arrests coming out of the US, suddenly everyone will be thinking on different bases. On a different basis, they'll be thinking, hang on, well, now maybe we can explore what happened to us during COVID. Maybe we can explore if it's reasonable or not to put our hand up and say, hang on a second, I do have a problem with 750,000 immigrants a year coming in when I cannot find a rental property. Can you perhaps explain where you're going in your work? Because you did mention immigration earlier. Is there a connection there within natural law and the work that you're doing to explain, at least to resist and not be vilified for said resistance?
I mean, there's a lot of ways that you can pull apart the immigration thing. Another concept we deal with is property. The law as we have it now deals with personal property. You can't go and steal someone's car or walk into their house and steal their wallet or, you know, etc. But we propose like an empirical system of human property that includes common property. So humans have commons, we list all this stuff down too. So demonstrated interest, genetic capital, human capital, informational commons, informational institutions, formal institutions, physical commons, monuments, arts, and things like that. So we talk about the importance of all of these things to different people. And so the point being that if you have to pull down your statues, which is your symbols of cultural identity and pride, to appease migrants, then they're not acting reciprocally towards you. And you've got a case to say, well, we as a people have a common property to our, let's say, our informational commons. the information that we all share in common that we use to navigate our society. If you're going to impede on that, well, natural law says that that is the same as when you're stealing my wallet. You can't take my property. Well, I invest in informational commons. So another little thing that's really interesting is property is when you bear a cost. If I go and dig a hole, I use my body, and that hole, in a sense, is I created it because it happened as a result of my efforts. But if I go in my society and I tell the truth, so sometimes I might actually be better off lying. But if I don't lie and I tell the truth instead, what I'm doing is foregoing getting something for myself in the moment to invest in a common property for all people where we tell the truth. And just like a monetary investment, instead of spending say I've got 10 grand, I've got a spare 10 grand, I could go and blow it on drugs and a good time, and I will consume that capital right now. But if I go and put it in, if I invest that, then over time I'll get greater returns on my capital. It's the same thing when, just to pick one of many examples we use in informational comments, I might gain for myself in the moment by lying, but if I forego that gain and I invest that in my informational commons, the common property that society tells the truth, well, we all get greater benefits from doing that. So if you look at all these common properties, we have arguments would say that, if an immigrant comes here and says, Australia's racist, you're racist. Well, what you're doing is you're attacking our sense of collective identity. You're attacking our history. You're attacking our psychological well-being. What you're trying to do is using relational aggression against us so that you can demoralize us, so that you can take our stuff. And so that's not reciprocal. That's not reciprocal at all. Another little thing that's a personal thing of mine is, say, if you have a group of immigrants and they commit a certain crime rate at a higher rate than you do, and you say, you know what, a lot of people in your group are actually committing a lot of this type of crime, and they say, you're not allowed to talk about that because that makes you racist. So then I look at the natural law. What am I getting? And am I getting it reciprocally? That's what it comes down to. Am I getting what I want with reciprocal cooperation? So what that immigrant is doing is saying, I identify as part of this group. And people identify because they're getting something from it. What people act to get things. So if you are defending your group identity, it's because that group identity gets you things. But then when that group identity, people of that representative group identity are doing things to another group, and you say, hang on, I think you actually need to police your own group from this particular behavior that's happening at a greater rate. And you say, no, you're not allowed to judge our group identity. I'll say, well, that's not reciprocal because you are self-segregating into that group identity, but telling me that I can't treat you as a group. You're treating you as a group, but telling me that I can't. So that's not reciprocal. So that's one of my favorite arguments is, if you want people to cooperate between groups, then you have to police your own. You have to bear your own costs. And you find that with all the immigration debate where it's at these days, it's all just all over the place. I can pick apart what they're doing with immigration a million ways. From one, how it fails reciprocal cooperation.
Very interesting. Now, you mentioned earlier the idea of someone can't walk into your house and take your wallet. Where does natural law stand, or at least the understanding in relation to self-defense, as it were? And I'm thinking back to Victoria last week, where there was an opportunity to improve self-defense laws, given home invasions, etc., going on there. But there's this strange scenario that someone can commit a crime in your home, firstly by trespassing, so they shouldn't be protected by the law at all, and then somehow the law seems to apply if the person who is defending their own property, their own person, their own family, may somehow use excessive force, and then that therefore can be punished. Does natural law explain this, or can you explain this through natural law's eyes?
Yeah, exactly. So another senior fellow of the Institute, Luke, is very good on this because he's an ex-Marine and he talks about self-defense a lot. And he's got a phrase that the government forces us, imposes upon us to play the game of trust the bad guy. So the whole point is that, and you should follow Luke Weinhagen. Once again, get in touch with me on Twitter if you're not sure. I can point you in the direction of all these great people. But the point being is that if someone violates your process, we talk about reciprocity in display, word, and deed. So if you were displaying signs to me of hostility, I've got every right to judge you based on what you're displaying to me, or how you're acting, or how you're speaking to me. So if you have violated my property and come into my home, the truth is that I have no idea what your intentions are. Now, for the government to say, you must have restraint, you must not attack this person, you must do this, blah, 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 it is forcing me to bear the cost of trusting the bad guy. Because I don't know if that man is there to attack my wife and my children, or he's on drugs and walked into the wrong house. I don't know. It could be anywhere in between. It could be the worst possible things imaginable. And so it's completely justified on me to defend my demonstrated interests, my home, my sovereignty, my family, which are all my demonstrated interests, with whatever force I deem necessary. Now, the government is saying, we don't want you to do that. It's just providing an irreciprocal subsidy to criminals. It is forcing me to bear the costs of what the government wants and what the criminals want, which is not reciprocal. Once again, it's forcing me to play trust the bad guy. Well, why do I need to trust? To trust somebody is to bear a cost. And the only justifiable way to impose a cost on someone is, once again, with a checklist. Is it productive? Am I going to get returns on trusting this person? Can you warranty me that if we play trust the bad guy, you will be liable if anything happens? But if I play trust the bad guy and this person kills my family, you're not even able to give me restitution. You're not even able to pay me back for that giant cost. So you have no right to insist that I bear that cost, because you cannot even restitute me if the worst happens. It's oppression. It's just government oppression.
That is a profound answer, Rob, and I think there'll be people who will see this and think, wow, I finally am starting to understand how this system is working against us. Therefore, considering now, if you were to perhaps, or there were people in natural law that were able to advise the lawmakers, how might you sit down in the future in front of a bunch of brand newly elected politicians and explain this concept of natural law in the basic terms? Is there a way that this could create the process? It's almost as if you accidentally land up as an elected official, you accidentally become a politician, you accidentally work out what's going on, and then you have to learn on the run for 3 or 4 years and maybe survive and maybe go on and become a politician, because a successful politician. But then you look at Anthony Albanese, almost 30 years elected, Prime Minister now in his second term, and you can't argue, except for his own people that want to tell you that this is working for them, that this is anything but a natural law, just display, word, deed society anymore. It feels like we're being ruled. It feels like that we're being told that the way that it's going to happen, and just bad luck, shut up, go along, get along. None of that adds up.
No, it is oppression. These people are just getting what they want and they're completely happy about it. That's what's going on. It is warfare. It is oppression. It's demonstrably so. And the good thing about, people like myself and the other fellows of the Institute is we can explain why, but criminals never give up their crime willingly. I mean, that's the problem. The problem we have is that the postmodernists were kind of right, is that if things do devolve just down into power, then that's where they devolve to. And so you'll find now, I mean, I deal with these people all the time, explaining from the ground up the system in coherent terms. As you think that there's a magical set of words to explain things so that it clicks in another person's head. But the real problem is that if the other person doesn't want it to click, it's not going to. If they don't want to give up what they're getting for free, then they're not going to. And so this also gets down into the natural law that rights are constructed. Rights are constructed by mutual insurance. We don't talk about rights. It's very empirical. We're always empirical. What's the real world? How in terms of real world operations does something that we're talking about manifest? Well, rights are constructed social technology that are constructed by mutual insurance, which means we all agree that if this person does this, we will act with force to punish them. That's what a right is that we all agree that we're going to punish violations of this. If you don't have the power to punish violations of this, then you don't have a right. And so that's where we're at, is that, our institutions have been captured. A lot of people are just getting what they want at their expense, and we're really struggling to have the power to enforce reciprocity. We're not there yet. And I mean, that's why, I do what I do, is to put the ideas out there, because we need to organize we need to be an organized collective that have a signpost of where we're heading, have an ideal state in mind. That's one of my problems with libertarianism, is that, they're so individualistic. It's hard to get them to agree on anything. And the problem is that collectives always outcompete individuals. So we do need to work together. And, things are really heating up. There's, I don't know if you've heard about a guy called David Betts. He's a professor of war studies from King's College London. And he's been doing the podcast circuit for about 6 months, saying, I'm not advocating for this. I'm warning the UK is going to burst. Civil war is getting more and more likely, because that's what happens, is that people are doubling down on getting what they want irreciprocally. It leaves you not many options. That's the problem. There's really nice ways out of it, which I would love to see, but it's almost out of my hands too. Like if you take everything from enough people, if they've got no incentive to participate with the system, then they don't. It all comes down to incentives. So, having dealt with some people in politics, people have said to me, politics is a blood sport. You find people who are literally, I've got the reins of power now. They will piss on your grave. They don't care. They really don't care. If they can get what they can get, they're just, somebody stop me, do your best, It's a bit of a blood sport. And so there's the black pill, that's just kind of where we're at, I think that cooperation is the ideal state. Reciprocal cooperation in accordance with natural law is the ideal state between people, but you need to be organized enough to enforce it. You need to be able to say, this is what we want and what we're pushing for. But because it is a good system, and because it does have a lot of the answers really laid out in a systematic and well thought out and fair way, hopefully a lot of people, it resonates with them, and they go, well, that actually is quite a good system. And there's a lot of people incentivized to take it on. And so hopefully, maybe one day we have the ability to push this onto the institutions and say, this is what the people want, and it makes sense, and you got to get on board. But, unfortunately, for whatever reason, even politically, it's always more than 50% of people who want much less immigration. And I can explain why. A lot of it comes down to imposing on these common properties. I'll just say them again, our genetic capital. And this is not a popular topic, but if you import X amount of people from X amount of country, what's the cost of lowering the average IQ of your society? Are you going to go and become a third world society, or are you going to have a first world society? Do the people in your society who currently have a modern civilization want you to drop the average IQ to below 90? No. The human capital, the informational commons, even an informational commons is something like a common set of information and knowledge that we use to live. And it might be something as simple as, men and women are different, so men should act like this and women should act like this, and they'll end up attracted to each other and they'll have babies. But what's happened is so many Marxist attacks upon our informational commons that's saying, well, men and women are the same and they don't owe anything different to each other, and they don't have to put any effort into being attractive to one another. And as a result, our birth rate is rapidly free falling because people have destroyed our informational commons, the information that we grow up and rely on to have a civilization. They've destroyed that. And so once again, that violates reciprocity. Informational institution, it's informal institutions with things like habits, manners, ethics, morals. Formal institutions, religion, banking, education, all of these things have become predatory and rent-seeking. Formal commons, so physical capital, so, parks and things, monuments and artifacts. This is what we say about these. Monuments claim territory, demonstrate wealth, and provide one of the longest and most invariable normative and economic returns that any culture can construct as a demonstration of conspicuous production. So, conspicuous consumption, where you splash money around because it makes you look like you can. Well, that's what a civilization does. It says, we are awesome. We have money. Things are working great. Look at these wonderful monuments we're building. It makes people feel good. It makes people productive. It makes people happy. It makes people feel like they're winning. So you destroy these things and you take away all those positive psychological benefits from people. So, and then common opportunity interests. So there's a whole list of these sort of things too. I've just spelled out a few of them. But so with any of these issues you want to talk about, we have a pathway to say, this is how you are getting what you want at the expense of what everybody else wants. Therefore, it's not reciprocal. Therefore, in my ideal world, the law should be able to act upon you because you're being a criminal.
Yes. And at the same time, the government, who is meant to serve, which should be the absolute working definition of natural law, serves itself at the expense of the people and uses part of the people who will go along with them to get their way. And if anything, it makes it entirely unnatural in the process. Rob, it's been a great discussion. The time's run away from us, but you've only just scratched the surface, really. So people can find you at the McMullan on X. Is there any other website or other people that they should follow?
Because of the suppression and things like that, I really just work on X. They've opened it up to a very fair degree that we can have hard conversations. In 2022, during the campaign, then, I'd be trying to type on Facebook, and as soon as you wrote the words vaccine or injury or something, it just deleted. Sorry, an error has occurred, and it just deleted the post. So, I really just work on X, and I've got shows on there as well that I'll pin. This one I've done other pins, so another good show that I did with Damien Curry on the other side was we talked about the values of Western civilization. So we talked very specifically about the values of Western civilization: truth over face, law as the primary institution, sovereignty and reciprocity and responsibility, etc. And another little nugget there too is that the West is the most aligned with the laws of nature. So there are inherent laws of nature: scarcity, entropy, the need for cooperation, etc. The special sauce of the West is that we are most adapted to them. which is why they attack us so much. They attack us as a proxy for God and nature's laws, because they don't like the laws of nature. They think the laws of nature are oppressive. And that's where this whole woke movement against the West and white males has come from, is they're attacking us as a proxy for the inherent laws of nature. But so, yeah, I go into all that sort of stuff as well. And, you know, if you like Western civilization and you want to be able to defend it, it's pretty good to have some language that gives you very specific language on what it is you want to defend. You might feel it, but I hope that I can maybe help people express it.
It's a fascinating subject, and as we just said, just scratching the surface. But thank you for explaining it in so many different ways. You can check out Rob at the McMullan there on the screen, at the McMullan on X. Rob McMullan, thanks for your time today on the 51st State.
Thanks, Jason. Pleasure.
Brilliant. Well, we're going to end the show there, and I will see you all again very soon. Don't go anywhere. Of course, check out anr.news for the latest and ANR headlines. Jason Q Citizen 1, different places there on X, and I'll see you all on the next.